Good day, everybody. This is another stream of Luik stories. Luik being my name, I'm a publisher of the largest news media in the Baltics, Delfi. And this particular stream is going to be done for our weekly magazine, Eesti Express. And with me, we have Raivo Vare. We together are going to interview our very, very pronounced guest. And Raivo Vare has been the Minister of Transportation and Communication of Estonian Republic, also the State Minister of Republic of Estonia, and he was also in a position of a CEO of Pak Terminal, the largest Russian oil transit organization, the main owner of which was Royal Vopak from Holland. And now I'm very pleased to greet Bill Browder. He could be named a hero. Bill Browder established a fund called Hermitage in Russia, which got hugely profitable, unbelievably profitable, by buying shares in Gazprom and various other Russian oil and gas companies. And then Putin's government, who Mr. Browder had earlier kind of praised, haven't you, Mr. Browder? He turned against Hermitage, against Mr. Browder, because Mr. Browder was too demanding in business moral sense, I would say. Welcome to our stream, Mr. Bill Browder.
I'm happy to be here. Nice to talk to both of you.
What about our first question, Raivo?
The first question will be just for our listeners and watchers. What was the reason you went for Russian business? You went there for beginning of 90s and you were very successful there. And then suddenly in 2005, everything ends and turned around and got into what we have right now. What was the reason? What was the story behind?
So I come from an unusual American family. My grandfather was the head of the American Communist Party between 1932 and 1945.
Oh, hell.
And so in my family rebellion, I decided to put on a suit and tie and become a capitalist. And I went to business school at Stanford and graduated in 1989, which was the year the Berlin Wall came down. And I said to myself, if my grandfather was the biggest communist in America and the Berlin Wall has just come down, I'm going to try to become the biggest capitalist in Eastern Europe. And I moved to Moscow. I set up this investment fund. And as you mentioned in the introduction, it became a spectacular success. So I was buying shares of big Russian oil and gas companies at like 1/10 of 1% of their true value. And the valuations and the stock prices started to rise. And for a brief period of time, I was a hero in the financial markets. But I started to discover massive fraud that was going on in these companies like Gazprom and Surgutneftegas and so on.
You didn't suspect it was going on, did you? In Russia?
Well, I mean, it was sort of obvious that there's something going on. But, you know, what we were discovering was far worse than anyone could have imagined. I mean, there was just these companies were effectively non-profit companies because all the profits were being stolen. I mean, Gazprom should be the most profitable oil and gas company in the world, but all the money was being stolen in every possible way you could imagine, through the transfer pricing, through embezzlement, dilutions, asset stripping. Everything was going on at Gazprom and other companies.
But nothing changed because Gazprom changed hands in a sense. Rem Vyacherev and his company was pushed out and replaced by new generation and state majority, and still everything went like it was before, and it's continuing until now. Even.
Well, something did change when I got involved. So I got involved in exposing the crimes of Rem Vyacherev, and we basically were able to prove that Rem Vyacherev and a bunch of guys around him had stolen oil and gas reserves equal to the size of Kuwait out of Gazprom between 1996 and 1999. And we had all the evidence, and we presented this. And we did it in the format of a campaign to get a seat on the board of Gazprom. And so in a true American political campaign style, we would go around with our party platform. Here's our town hall meeting with all of the money being stolen out of Gazprom. And we said, if we got onto the board, we would then scream bloody murder about this. Well, we never got onto the board because the Gazprom literally would pay for people's votes to make sure that we just got below the threshold to get on the board. But just the campaign in itself created such a storm of indignation that in 2001, when Putin had first come into power, he decided to fire Rem Vyakarev using the state's majority shareholding. And he brought in a guy named Alexei Miller. And Alexei Miller was one of his pals from St. Petersburg. And Alexei Miller's first announcement was, we're not going to steal any more assets out of Gazprom.
Oh, yeah?
I stress the word assets.
Okay, but they have been stealing. They are going to continue stealing. Let's not go into too much detail because our objective here in this interview is another one. Just one personal remark. As I understood, having of course read your first book and very first to read your second one, The Freezing Order, the fresh one. In your first book, you are telling quite another story about your motives entering Russia. It's about, do you understand Russian? Любовь, русская женщина, love. Was it love towards a particular Russian woman? A beautiful one.
Well, there's a love story in every good book. There has to be a love story.
Cherche la femme, as our French friends say, right? So it was also this one, right?
Well, I mean, I that's where I met my wife, who in year 2000, who's my wife today, and we've built a beautiful life together. So
our regards. Yes, you have been escaping different countries with your wife supporting you, right?
Well, she's been. Some people say that she's the one you want to keep. You don't want to get mad at you.
Okay, let me try to offer you a look from the perspective of Moscow political mafia. I would see you as someone who entered with some foreign investment money. The next question would be how much money you put into Russia and how much money you got out of it. As I understand, and as you also reflect in your first book, it was hugely profitable business, profitability being hundreds of percents per year. And still this foreigner is not content. Still he's trying to, somehow interfere into our games. He doesn't like us. He's playing a very, very unpolite small investor. Let's kick him out. That's what the Moscow perspective would be. How much did how much did Hermitage earn, and how much did you invest? What was the gap here? How much profit did
it's a little hard to calculate because money came in at different stages and came out at different stages.
Oh, is it? Sir, how different? Let's say tens of millions, hundreds of millions.
We made billions of dollars. We made billions of dollars
out of raw material, gas and oil business in Russia, and you were still not content.
Well, no. Of course, I wasn't content. I was. Okay. So, nor should anybody else have been content. If you have you have 100 guys who are stealing all the money, and so
Don't attack me. I was trying to present the Moscow perspective.
Yeah. Well, I'm not attacking you. I'm justifying myself.
No need to. Okay.
Well, I used to work for the servicing of Russian oil exports, and I can say from my own personal experience that very often it was a kind of scheme where everybody gets something along the line, but never it was made the most efficient way. It was always like giving to everybody something, and everybody kept somehow content with it, and that's it.
Have you been bribing Russian officials, Raivo?
No, I didn't. I didn't need to because there were other guys who did it.
Okay. I'll tell you what, during the time you were here, you were not here, but in Russia, sorry, we're in Estonia currently. You probably heard what happened to the vice president of Lukoil, Mr. Vitaly Schmidt. Very curious death. When we here...
Was he the one who jumped out of the building?
Well, jumped or I don't know. Okay, then we observed here in Estonia, an Estonian gentleman called Õiemets was in charge of a company called Lukoil Europe. He died very mysteriously. He drove a huge Mercedes, the Cell Mercedeses, they are like tanks. And somehow, very curious death. Then you, of course, know, I don't know whether you know or not, but that was a vice president of Bank of Russia who, in the year 2009, came here into Estonia because money of Russian taxpayers was being siphoned through Estonian bank called Danske, a branch of Danish bank. He made complaints to our financial institutions, to our prosecutor's office. They did nothing. And then he was killed in Moscow. So you saw it. You saw it.
There is a kind of pattern.
Yes, you saw it everywhere. Why were you so, angry with that? This is their way.
Well, there's no reason not to be angry with it. They're a bunch of crooks. They're a bunch of killers.
Yeah.
They try to present this image like they're legitimate. They were going around the world saying, we're legitimate. They would eat at the nicest restaurants with the white tablecloths and pretend that they were legitimate and hire PR advisors. And then they in one meeting they would be talking about oil prices. In the next meeting they'd be talking about poisoning their enemies. These are criminals of the highest proportion. And they're killers, and we've now seen with our own eyes every day. Look, today they're bombing civilians all over Ukraine for no military purpose other than just terrorizing people.
Mr. Browder, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like, if I'm looking what has happened with you, how you have been with these problems, you've been always tackling this from the angle that actually it's not just stealing money, but it's stealing from the Russian taxpayers, from the Russian state itself. So even during the stay in minority shares in state companies, you were always stressing this point. And nevertheless, the Russian state didn't pay attention, didn't take actions very much, or at the end turned against you. What's the reason? What's the logic behind it? Because thieves should be persecuted, not given free pass.
Why are we all smiling now?
Well, this was my position as well, which is that, you mentioned Danske Bank, the former head of the Russian central bank went to complain about Danske Bank.
The vice president.
He gets killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gets killed, and I knew the guy. He was one of the few honest government officials in Russia, a good man. He gets killed, and then for the next 10 years, Danske Bank sees $232 billion of dirty money laundered.
160. They recently confessed to Department of Justice of US. 160. So it all went on because our guys were just writing. You know what they did? They were so furious, our officials. So they wrote a first very demanding letter to Copenhagen, which of course got on the delete button on it, and then, seeing that this enormous theft and money laundering goes on, they wrote the second very wicked letter without going to our prosecutor's office of writing some notes about it. And this guy got killed. You remember how? The vice president of Central Bank of Russia.
Yeah, he was killed in he was playing football at Spartak Stadium in a bank pickup league. And they shot him to death, and his driver right outside as he finished his football game. A damning fact. We are sitting at Narva Road, central Tallinn now. This is our expert studio, and the Danske Bank building is the next building there. Fuck them.
Former Danske Bank building.
All right.
But just to finish my thought, so these guys stole $232 billion. Through Danske Bank, and if you did the analysis at the other banks, Raiffeisen and Austria and UBS and Deutsche, you'd probably find that they've stolen $1 trillion, and this is not, and so there's like 1,000 people involved in this, this unbelievable crime, and everybody else is like, dying early because they don't get health care, they don't have heart medication, their kids aren't being educated. And so this is the most outrageous, unfair thing that could have ever happened. And it doesn't serve anybody's purpose other than a very, very small group of people who are desperately trying to hold on to their money and keep their power to hold on to their money.
Everybody
and they're ready to
agrees,
kill everybody who stands in their way.
Raivo.
But isn't it a kind of system which has been established in Russia and which has flourished nowadays even, that everybody is involved in a sense? So from the lowest layers of the officialdom, they are starting to take bribes, and then they move them up to the superiors, and at the end they end up with these famous cases of two, by the way, Minister of Interior officers being arrested because they had actually in cash full apartments of cash, not just laying down some cash somewhere in apartments, but apartments packed fully until the very entrance door to this apartment with the cash in different currencies. So this is something which looks like it's not their business even. They are just cash keepers, nothing else. Somebody else is profiting, or entire hierarchy is profiting out of it. Isn't it the case in the case you are involved also?
Yeah, I mean, basically, nobody goes into government service in Russia to serve the people of Russia. Every single person who goes into government service, from the lowest tax policeman right up to the top president of the country, is doing it to steal money. But I mean, most of these people, I mean, there's not that many people who get it. I mean, most people are living in poverty in Russia. You know, there's 141 million people in Russia, and I would say 1,000 of them are living like extreme luxury. And then maybe 1 million of them are part of this apparatus that gets some, you know, where the, you know, a little bit of these tips fall off the, you know, a few thousand here, a few 10,000 there.
No argument here, sir. No argument.
But why I was asking it, because in the very case we are talking about, let's put it this way, in this case, actually these officers, Kuznetsov and Karpov, was actually promoted later stage, which is not the usual thing as far as I know. And I know that in Russian military systems, paramilitary systems, you never get your career advanced if you are involved in scandal. But in this case, they were actually promoted, not just thrown out of the service or being stopped in their career.
Raivo, let me just explain this to our viewers. Those Lieutenant Colonel Artem Kuznetsov and Major Pavel Karpov, whose official salary, by the way, is $530 per month. They were the guys who entered Bill Browder's organization, the Hermitage offices, in June 2007 and confiscated all the hard disk, all the documentation, and also the stamps. And then they, with the help of tax department of Russian Federation, they returned $230 million tax refunds. They returned tax money of Russian taxpayers to the accounts of the company, which was already under the control of those two Russian policemen, Artem Kuznetsov and Pavel Karpov. This is the case, isn't it?
Yeah, but it broke out into something which is international major scandal, actually, because of Bill. And still they were promoted. It doesn't fit into my understanding of Russian society mechanism, except the case that actually they were acting on behalf of somebody.
Your comment.
Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Bill. Your comment.
Well, so so basically, the reason they were promoted is the same reason that, like, Putin has given medals to the army officers that conducted the rapes in outside of Kiev when they took over various towns in this war. You know, every time that he's exposed, he has to do something, and so the best way of, you know, thumbing his nose at the world is to promote these two officers who are, you know, most, you know, complicit in this whole thing. And why is Putin so interested in this crime? Why is he so interested in covering it up? Because he was a beneficiary of it. We learned through the Panama Papers that his proxy, his custodian, was this cellist named Sergei Roldugin. This guy, he was worth $2 billion, played the cello.
A billionaire.
Really profitable cello playing. And by the way, the next richest cello player in the world is Yo-Yo Ma. He's only worth $25 million. And we discovered that Sergei Roldugin,
Okay.
Sergei Roldugin got some of the money, which meant that Putin got some of the money. So we've exposed a crime. Sergei exposed the crime. He was killed for exposing it. We go on a worldwide mission to get justice. Everybody learns about the crime. And Putin is a beneficiary of the crime. And so what does he do? He promotes the guys who have been outed as the culprits in the crime, because that's how Putin operates. Okay. He gives criminals a criminal organization.
I'm sorry, as your time is limited, sir. Let me ask this personal question. Then, after the Moscow Mafia, after the Camarilla understood that you are not going to give in, that you are going to press charges, you are going to expose what happened to Hermitage, which was being forcefully taken over, the corporate trading, very, very, very usual in Russia, actually. They tried to intimidate you, as I've been listing in my notes here, by several ways. They didn't poison you. We are very happy to have you here or in United Kingdom now. They tried to push an Interpol arrest. You were being arrested, luckily only kept for 2 hours, in Spanish police. So they organized a huge smear campaign, both in the United States and in Europe, even in Euro Parliament. A Green Party representative of Finland, Mrs. Haudala, was part of the smear campaign, for instance, or else a Russian filmmaker called Andrei Nekrasov, by the way, the boyfriend of Mrs. Haudala. Then there were a huge pack of libel accusations in UK court, which of course is a nice place to press your libel accusation. Everybody can feel insulted and press an accusation in United Kingdom. And then this was something extraordinary, because the others were, well, normal aggressive steps, but then the Russian side probably bribed your own lawyer, Mr. John Moscow, was it, to change sides. So all those 4 aspects.
In US. In US, in completely different litigation, which was you were a witness to, not actually.
So they tried to get you to ruin your prestige, to get you arrested. Are you drinking tea, sir? You know, the Geru is.
I don't drink tea with Russian strangers, but
I hope so. I hope so. All right. But, how did you survive? And there's another thing for you as a businessman. Your company, Hermitage, now, it's a family office. It's incorporated in Guernsey. This is a British offshore, as I understand. And this fight must have cost you millions. The PR fight, the course fight, how many per year?
I don't have an exact figure, but tens of millions. I mean, it's been... Imagine, 13 years of my life, they've been chasing me with 8 Interpol arrest warrants, with extradition requests, I've been sued in the United Kingdom. I'm currently being sued in the United States. They sentenced me twice in prison in Russia for 18 years in absentia. They make movies about me. They pay journalists to write bad stories. I think there's like 3 books. There's 3 different books written about me, by people just... I think one of them's in Denmark, actually. I think it was. I'm not sure, but I suspect it was funded by somebody at Danske Bank. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe not. But it's incredible the amount of ink and effort and money that they spent. So whatever I spent, they spent 10 times as much trying to destroy me. And
yes,
here I am 30 years later. I'm not.
Putinoids, I would call them. They seem to have excess money. My friend Raivo just drew my attention that there was a certain vice governor of Oblast of Moscow, Katsov, whose family came to New York to testify. So they spent $50,000 in New York using a Lux suite in Plaza Hotel in a Central Park, then eating at a very luxurious Greek restaurant, 15 different dishes, drank grappa, and then wanted U.S. government to pay for it. Was it?
Yeah, so imagine that. The U.S. So these guys had properties worth
Who were
$20
they?
million.
Who were they? Vice oblast governors?
The son of the vice governor of the Moscow region. And we discovered that he got some of the money, his company, his Cyprus company, got some of the money that was connected to the Sergei, the $230 million fraud that Sergei had uncovered and exposed. And so we filed a criminal complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice. We found money. We found real estate in New York. My lawyer, as you mentioned, this guy named John Moscow, switched sides, went from my lawyer to become their defense lawyer.
Wanted to get you to expose all your private communication, bank accounts, everything.
He wanted my security details. He wanted all of where I traveled to, where I stayed.
With an intent to kill you, probably.
Well, I mean, what else is that? Why would he be asking for my personal security details? And so, I mean, really nasty stuff. Anyways, we survived the whole thing. But these guys, they must have spent, I don't know, I would guess somewhere between $20 and $30 million to make this problem go away.
Yes.
It really is.
It was more than the money they officially put into the real estate. So basically, somebody else paid for it, most likely.
Well, I think they probably paid for it, but they're all sort of feeding at the same trough. So who knows how who's making allocations to who? But I think Putin probably said, you go and spend whatever you need to spend to make sure this thing goes away. And they didn't just try to make the case go away. They also went to Washington and started lobbying everybody, including they went to Trump Tower when Donald Trump was nominated before he was elected. Their lawyer went to Trump Tower and said, if you get elected, can you repeal the Magnitsky Act, this legislation named after Sergei Magnitsky, my murdered lawyer?
Veselnitskaya, the lawyer, I mean.
Veselnitskaya, yeah.
Veselnitskaya, the one who cannot leave Russia now because he would be imprisoned. She would be in prison soon. Yeah.
Actually, you mentioned the Magnitsky Act. Several countries have adopted the Magnitsky Act due to your efforts, and actually there is
in Europe, Estonia was one of the first.
Yeah, Estonia was 2016, but not all countries have accepted or enforced this. Adopted it first. Secondly, the question is there are lists of people and institutions involved. And meaning is even broader because the qualification is to get into this list is to violation of human rights and so on and so forth. So it's very broad effort actually, or outcome of your effort in general. But still, question remains: how much has happened based on this? On these sanctions.
How much
lists?
Substance, how much flats in New York, apartments in London have been confiscated? Where is this 230 million? Did you succeed?
Just day before yesterday, the Spanish police announced that they arrested a woman in Tenerife and froze 75 properties worth 25 million euros on the back of the Magnitsky investigation just a couple days ago. All over the world.
Must have not been a regular woman. Who was it? Or give us some hints.
We don't know the name. Okay. We don't know the name, but Russian, I think. But in terms of the sanctions, so the Magnitsky Act was the first time that anyone had ever used individual targeted sanctions against a country. And since then, the Magnitsky Act is now the template for all the sanctions against all the officials and all the oligarchs who are being sanctioned for the invasion of Ukraine. And there's, tens of billions of dollars frozen under the Ukraine sanctions. And there's probably now, just on Human Rights Day, which was about a week ago, the United States, Canada, Australia, EU, UK sanctioned hundreds of people on the Magnitsky Act. And so it's turned into an absolute nightmare if you're involved in human rights abuse, not just in Russia, but all over the world, all sorts of, in the Philippines and China and Iran, all over the world. If you're involved in human rights abuse, life is not so good anymore. All of a sudden you can't travel. Your money gets frozen in your bank.
Has this been the case? Those policemen, for instance, Pavel Karpov and Artyom Kuznetsov, was their money or their, what was it? His mother had a huge apartment, but it was in Moscow, not to be confiscated. But have their physical assets been confiscated?
I think most of their physical assets are
seized
in
is
Russia.
the American word, isn't
Seized,
it?
yeah.
Seized. Have they?
No, I think most of their assets are in Russia. But these guys are on, so Karpov and Kuznetsov, these two characters, they're on the US sanctions list, they're on the Canadian sanctions list, they're on the UK sanctions list, they're on the Australian sanctions list, they're on the Estonian sanctions list, they're on the Lithuanian sanctions list. And so, I mean, basically, I don't think that these guys can travel anymore. I don't think that
Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Dubai or not Dubai, Dubai. But I'm asking you. I'm now, sir. I just want to seriously praise you. Lots of people have been escaping Interpol arrest warrants. Lots of people have been fighting libel accusations in courts, fighting against smear campaigns. A lot of people have changed their lawyers because they have been corrupted. But you, sir, you have been achieving a wonderful thing, just a wonder. You, with the help of whom, costing how much GR or PR money, I mean government relations, you achieved at least 2 votes in US Congress by 85 to 90% majority. One of which was, of course, the Magnitsky Act. That was a very queer representative from Orange County. Daniel Robache was he wanted to he claimed that the name of the act should not be Magnitsky. Okay. And then was not far away from here, 82 kilometers from here in Helsinki, in the year 2019. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, being the president of the mightiest states of the world, met. So Donald Trump was being instructed by his government to demand those GRU poisoning team members to be given under US jurisdiction. And what did Putin want in exchange?
He wanted me. And he announced it in public. And Donald Trump said, I think that's a great offer. He was ready to honor that. God almighty.
Genius.
And thank God.
How did it feel this moment? You told in Julia Latonia's stream that you were constantly checking the tweets, you know.
From Helsinki.
Well, I was shocked. I'm the most powerful man in the free world, wants to hand me over to the guy who wants to kill me. Unbelievable. But it all ended when the Senate voted 98-0 not to hand me over. And so here I am today. So
how did you convince them? Did you have a mighty advisors team, PR, GR team?
No.
Alone.
This happened organically. And I should point out that I've not spent a single dollar lobbying. I've not made a campaign contribution to any candidate in any party at any point ever in this fight for justice. It's the power of the story.
But Moscow, Putin's Moscow, probably has been spending quite a few millions of dollars because, as I understand, there are at least 6 to 7 Putinists in U.S. Congress now. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Madison Cawthorn, Lauren Bauer, I think. Is it Lauren Bauer? Congress.
Lauren Boebert.
Okay.
Boebert.
So 6 to 7 Putinists, it's not much, but it's what do they do then? What do they claim?
Well, so for example, they all voted against Finland and Sweden joining NATO. They voted against the refreshing of the Magnitsky Act. They voted against. They make announcements saying that Ukraine should not get any more money. That this is like the party of the wing of the Putin wing of the Republican Party, and the MAGA wing, the Trump wing.
Of course.
But isn't it so that by your own experience you have encountered a lot of people who seems to be, let's say, very remote in relation with Russia, but somehow they act like agents of influence from Russian side? Why?
Yeah, it's I think purely money. Or either money, or someone has been blackmailed or threatened or God knows what. I mean, there's no reason to be sympathetic to Putin unless there's some other agenda there, which is.
Tell us what happens with the money with the sources, with the foreign resources of Russian central bank. Reportedly, it's a huge quantity, 300 billions, as Ursula von der Leyen has been claiming. The Atlantic Council. Do you understand, right, that this is a reputable organization?
Yes, it's a good yes. Organization.
Their investigator called Charles Lichtfeld claims that US and G7 countries and EU have not arrested, they have not been finding 300 billions on the central bank accounts. Could it be that we are just giving poor Ukrainians hope that this money will be diverted to Republic of Ukraine, and we don't even have this money under our command? We don't know where it is or whether there has been ever 3,000 billions, or it's rather 80 to 100 billions.
Well, I don't know the true answer to that question. I believe that this 350 billion is probably the most important after the weapons. It's the second most important thing to determine the outcome of this war. And I sure hope that we can find that money if it's been misplaced, because it's going to be such an important question and support that Ukrainians need. I mean, the Putin has killed tens, if not hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. He's created $1 trillion of damage to Ukraine, and we need to start somewhere. And the Russians should be the first people to start paying for it before we dig into our own pockets. And deal with these types of crises. I actually don't think they would have done it in time. I've seen lots of situations where they had plenty of advance warning and they still didn't act.
So where is the money? I mean, 200 billions out of those 300 are missing. That's a huge sum, isn't it, Mr. Browder?
Well, if that's true, it's spectacularly scandalous, because I think from my perspective, one of the most important aspects going forward of this war is to get that money seized and then used for
Ukraine.
By your own, you have found, you have traced the money in the case. For central banks, it should be much easier to accomplish the task, most likely.
Well, let's hope that this is just a misunderstanding and not a genuine problem. It really is shocking if it's true.
The Ukrainians, the government, and all those bloggers, they have been dividing this money for at least from the summertime, which is for hospitals, which is for bridges, infrastructure. Now, okay, let me ask you one final question. How do you think the international help, the so-called Marshall Plan to restore Ukraine, I mean, to build it up, how the money should be handled? Should the US and the European Union send their own governors there, or can Ukraine deal with the money without too much corruption?
Well, I think that Ukraine has changed a lot since before the war, because they understand that corruption is any display of the previous corruption that they were so famous for would lead to them dying, basically. I mean, their survival is by being honest and not wasting any money, not stealing any, reselling any arms, and their whole existence is based on them not being corrupt. Now, once the war is over, that fear of dying will probably diminish, but I think that they have changed fundamentally. Having said that, I think that there should be every possible check and balance and restriction and oversight over this money, because it would be the most tragic thing if they win the war and just go back to their old ways, when this is an opportunity for them to become a proper westernized European country with all the same values that we have, in the same way as Estonia went from being a Soviet country to being a European country. They have an opportunity to do the same thing, but they need all the...
Where Russian money in huge quantities is being laundered, I'm sorry to say, but we have changed, of course.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
put your last question.
Now is...
Okay.
Go on.
What's your last question?
Well, my last question will be actually not a question. It will be a wish. It will be a wish to you, Bill, because you have launched a fight which looks like a David against Goliath, and you've been extremely persistent in this fight. And due to this, to your efforts and to the start you've made, actually, now we have all these, as you mentioned, the Magnitsky Act is the first act which actually has launched has made the precedent for sanctioning, and I think that all I can wish is that you will stay steady.
The fight is keep up your good work.
Keep up.
Yes, and don't drink tea with Russian guests, please.
All right.
When is your next court sitting, court hearing, and in which country?
Not until the new year, thank God.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Season's greetings.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.